Disturbing things always happen on Halloween. My haunted encounters. Halloween, a time often associated with costumes, trick-or-treating, and spooky decorations, can also be a night when the boundary between our world and the supernatural seems disturbingly thin. As someone who has experienced several unsettling incidents on this eerie holiday, I can't help but share these accounts in hopes of shedding light on the darkness that surrounds October 31st. What follows is not just a recounting of experiences, but a reflection on the things that go bump in the night and the fear that can haunt us long after the holiday has passed. The first encounter, a job like no other. It all began with my job as a night security guard at a cemetery, a position that I initially took for some extra cash just after graduating from college. The job seemed easy enough. I'd patrol the grounds, check the security cameras, and make sure there was no vandalism. My boss, however, had a list of peculiar rules I had to follow, which seemed more like pranks than real instructions. "Make sure you remember the rules," he'd say with a serious look before leaving for the night. The cemetery was an old, sprawling plot with gnarled oak trees and weathered gravestones. There was an air of history here, and with that, an unsettling feeling that I was not alone. The first few nights were quiet, with nothing more than the rustle of leaves in the wind. But that changed as Halloween approached. The nights seemed darker, and the atmosphere grew colder. The rules. Among the rules given to me, one stood out. If you see a figure in a black top hat, approach him and ask, "Am I clear?" It sounded ridiculous. Who would wander through a cemetery at night, wearing a black top hat? But I followed the rules, most of them, at least, thinking it was all just a weird joke. However, as I would soon discover, there was more to these rules than met the eye. On Halloween night, as I completed my rounds, a chill settled over the cemetery, and I saw a tall, dark figure at the far end, wearing a black top hat. First, I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me, or perhaps a Halloween enthusiast pulling a prank. As I walked closer, I could see that he had no face, just a blank, featureless expanse where his eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. I could have run back to the office and ignored the rules, but something inside me urged me to follow through. "Am I clear?" I asked, my voice trembling. For a moment, there was only silence, and then a voice, as though coming from inside my own head, whispered, "Continue." I didn't stay to ask what that meant. I hurried to the next section, and as I did, the faceless man vanished into the darkness. Unexplainable events. After that night, odd occurrences became frequent. Security footage would show fleeting shadows that weren't there when I patrolled, and strange sounds echoed throughout the cemetery. There were whispers, laughter, and sometimes the distant cries of a child. I would often find myself checking over my shoulder, feeling as if I was being watched. The job, once monotonous, had become a nightly horror show. One evening, as I sat in the office reviewing the previous night's footage, I noticed a small figure darting between the gravestones. When I rewound the tape and played it back, the figure was gone. My boss's rules began to make more sense to me, but they also filled me with a creeping dread. It was as if he knew that something truly haunted the cemetery, something that could not be explained or ignored. The town's curse. The cemetery wasn't the only place with a dark past. The town itself carried a legend, a curse. Some would say, each year, around Halloween, a number of children had gone missing over the decades. Stories were told of an ancient ritual that demanded a sacrifice to appease restless spirits. The details were always vague, dismissed by most as mere superstition, but the eerie pattern persisted. There were also whispers of a shadowy figure that wandered the town. Some described it as a man in a black top hat. A local elder told me that the town's history was stained with tragedy. Centuries ago, during a harsh winter, a desperate deal had been made with an entity known only as the Watcher. The deal supposedly brought prosperity, but at a terrible cost. Every year, one child had to be given as a sacrifice to satisfy the Watcher. While most people dismissed the tale as folklore, the legend lingered, and there was an unspoken rule that children should never be out after dark on Halloween. A night to remember. The night after my encounter with the Faceless man, my father told me to stay inside and lock the doors. "You know how things get around here on Halloween," he said. I didn't need any convincing. As a child, I had heard the stories and had always felt uneasy on this night, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was drawing me outside. I watched from my window as the sun set and the sky turned a deep, foreboding shade of purple. The streets were empty, save for a few carved pumpkins glowing on porches. A figure moved across the street, a child, no older than 8, wearing a torn Halloween costume. I squinted, trying to make out his features, but his face was obscured by shadows. Against my better judgment, I stepped outside, calling to him. He didn't respond but continued walking toward the edge of the woods. "Hey, kid, it's not safe out here," I yelled, my voice betraying my fear. The boy stopped, turned slowly, and faced me. In the dim light, I saw that his eyes were hollow, his skin pale as moonlight. A voice echoed in my mind, the same voice I had heard in the cemetery. "Am I clear?" It was a warning, I realized, and in that moment, I understood the nature of the curse. The Faceless man, the children, the voices, they were all connected. The town was a nexus of malevolent forces, drawn to Halloween like moths to a flame, facing the darkness. For years, I had dismissed the tales as mere local folklore, but now I could no longer ignore the truth. The stories weren't just made up to scare kids. They were warnings. The Faceless man was not a prank or an illusion. He was a harbinger of something ancient and evil. The rules I had been given were not arbitrary. They were meant to protect me. The experiences left me with many questions. What did the Watcher want? Why were certain people, like myself, able to see these entities while others remained blissfully unaware? I never found concrete answers, but I did learn that the rules should never be broken. For as long as I worked at the cemetery, I followed them to the letter, and although I still saw unsettling things, I was never harmed. Reflections on fear and survival. Fear is a powerful emotion, one that can both protect and paralyze. In my encounters, I came to understand that fear was not always a signal to retreat. Sometimes, it was a call to confront what lay beyond the veil, to face the unknown. The rules I was given served as a guide, a way to navigate the darkness. This experience taught me that while fear can never be completely vanquished, can be managed, and through that management, we find the strength to endure. The power of stories. Halloween is a time when we tell stories to scare ourselves and each other. But some stories carry a kernel of truth. The legends, the rules, and the warnings all had their roots in actual events that shaped the town's history. These stories passed down through generations were not just a way to keep children in line, they were a form of survival, a way to cope with forces beyond our control. Lessons learned. The experiences I had on Halloween taught me several valuable lessons. Listen to warnings. Whether it's a set of rules or a gut feeling, there are signals that should not be ignored. In folklore and in life, these warnings often have a basis in reality. Respect the unknown. There are forces and phenomena we do not understand. Trying to challenge or dismiss them without understanding can have dire consequences. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the ability to face what scares us, to walk through the darkness even when we are afraid. In my encounters, I found that courage was sometimes as simple as following the rules, even when I did not understand them. A haunting conclusion. While the experiences I shared are specific to Halloween, the themes of fear, survival, and respect for the unknown are universal. As I look back on those nights, I no longer view them with dread but with a sense of gratitude. I was given a rare glimpse into a world few experience and was taught lessons that remain with me to this day. As Halloween approaches once more, I am reminded that there is much more to this holiday than costumes and candy. It is a time to remember that the line between the living and the dead is thinner than we think, and that sometimes, The stories we tell are more real than we would like to believe. Adding more stories to further illustrate the unsettling nature of Halloween, I'll share a few additional tales that were passed on to me over the years. Stories of others who encountered inexplicable events on this haunted night. The tale of the Vanishing Boy. A friend once recounted an incident from his childhood when he and his older brother went trick-or-treating. As they walked down a quiet street, they saw a boy standing alone at the end of a cul-de-sac. He was wearing a simple ghost costume, nothing unusual. However, as they approached, the boy seemed to fade away into the mist. They ran home, terrified, and told their parents, who dismissed it as a figment of their imagination. Yet, years later, my friend learned that a boy had indeed disappeared in that neighborhood on Halloween night many decades earlier. The Unmarked Grave. Another acquaintance, a local historian, shared a story about an unmarked grave in a forgotten corner of the cemetery. The grave was said to belong to a young girl who died under mysterious circumstances in the 1800s. Every year on Halloween, a single white rose would appear on the grave, even though no one in the town knew who placed it there. Some believe it was the spirit of the girl herself, while others think it was a family member who never forgave themselves for her untimely death.